Yes, well, my system to address that, I developed what's called the Czech totem pole. So actually a Native American Indian style totem pole, and each of the symbols represents a hierarchical control center, and everything below is controlled by everything above. The top is a big bird, which is the psyche. Below that, you have breathing, then you have mastication, then you have vision, then you have auditory, vestibular, upper cervical, visceral, and it just goes through the systems of the body. And I show how the higher order systems can sacrifice any system to compensate. For example, no matter what, if you have a breathing pattern disorder, any kind of breathing obstruction, your body will sacrifice any joint, nerve, anything it has to keep you breathing. If you can't see correctly, your body will do anything it has to do below your head to keep your eyes, ears, and teeth level with the horizon, because that's our reference point. So we know where we're at in space. So the direct answer to your question is that the psyche is really composed at one end of pure energy and at the other end of matter. The 7 chakras that are classically described in the Hindu chakra system are step down processes whereby the highest vibration of consciousness steps itself down into the physical structure. And if you study the chakra system, which there's plenty of good science on with people like William A. Tiller and many others, Cynthia Dale, etc., you can see that each chakra, the mental chakra, steps down into the astral or etheric chakra, or the astral chakra, which then steps down into the etheric body, which in Steiner's conception is the electromagnetic field created by the biochemical reactions in the body, for which there's 30 billion reactions a second. And then the etheric chakra steps down into the nadis and then the meridians, which then link to the glands, organs, and muscles of each system. So what's actually happening is, for example, you rarely will ever see a person who is happy that doesn't have a facial or a postural expression of happiness. We don't normally frown when we want to smile, and we don't stand like we're depressed when we're happy. And 55% of all language is communicated by posture and gesture. So we're actually speaking more through the language of the body than we are using words. And our thoughts and emotions interface with the physical body through the physical systems, and the hormones represent the molecules that transfer thought and emotion from the subtle domain, the invisible domain of your interior or your soul, into physical reality, so you can actually have an experience of them. So put in very simple terms, the body is a mirror for the psyche. It's a living mirror of the psyche. So when a person, for example, is holding on to a lot of anger, that tends to stagnate in the liver, because the frequency of the emotion anger correlates vibrationally with the frequency that the liver system runs on. And so what happens is you will start then to see changes in not only the function of the liver, but because all of your glands and organs get their sensory innervation from the sympathetic chain ganglia, which is why when a person's having a heart attack, they don't ever say, my pain is in my heart. They say, I have pain in my chest and my left arm.
Got it.
Because the heart borrows its sympathetic nerve fibers, its sensory fibers, from the same distribution as the musculoskeletal system's chest and left arm system. And a woman's uterus is linked to her lower abdominal and lumbopelvic region. So you see that back pain, for example, and pain through the sciatic distribution is very common in women that are premenstrual, because it actually sends its pain into the musculoskeletal system, because the glands and organs don't have their own nerve system for sensing pain. So the key point about that is anybody that's having a problem, such as the one I've described with their liver, when that energy gets congested, we hold that emotion. If we don't have the ability to effectively process an emotion or a threat or a trauma, such as the death of a loved one or the loss of a job or the fear and insecurity that COVID brought on, then what happens is it becomes held within the energy field around the organ that has a similar respective vibration to the thought, feeling, or emotion. And to the degree that that emotion must be held in a frozen state, it creates stagnation in the glands or organs, which then leads to health challenges and inflammatory reactions which then causes the abdominal wall to reflexively be inhibited because we have viscerosomatic and viscerosensory reflexes. So each organ can either excite a muscle to decrease the excitation in the organ by dissipating the stress into the muscle, which then is converted into a tetanic or a low-level contraction, which then dissipates the energy out of the body as heat to protect the organ. So what you end up seeing is whenever you have inflammation of an organ, a classic example is women's lower abdominal regions always distends when they're premenstrual because the uterus is inflamed. So it reflexively inhibits the transverse abdominis and the internal oblique and surrounding muscles so that the uterus has room to expand, which if a woman is athletic and she doesn't realize that, she's playing something like field hockey or golf or soccer, she's highly susceptible to low back injuries. And because the low back and the core stabilize the entire lower extremity, it could be meniscal tears, a cruciate ligament injury, an ankle sprain, because it destabilizes the entire kinetic chain. And that can also set a person up for muscle imbalance syndromes if they keep exercising because they don't realize they have core inhibition due to a reflex response from a gland or an organ. Now, if the abdominal wall stayed tight as the uterus was expanding, it would compress the uterus, which would decrease blood flow, which would decrease oxygen delivery, nutrient delivery, and minimize waste removal. So it would actually set the person up for a more serious illness or dysfunction. And so what do people do? They go to the gym and do a million crunches trying to flatten their abdomen instead of realizing there's a natural physiological process taking place. But when you look at the number of people on the planet at any given minute that have some kind of significant inflammatory syndrome in a gland or an organ, who are also going to gyms and repeatedly working out and trying to stretch and mobilize, but don't realize that they're actually treating the physical and physiological symptoms of an underlying diet, lifestyle, or mental emotional imbalance, then you can see why people say things like, my back feels better as long as I keep doing my stretches and exercises, but as soon as I stop, I start hurting again, which means they're modulating the body's adaptation. In other words, to adapt to one of these types of stresses means some muscles have to work harder to compensate for the ones that are being shut down by the gland or the organ to make room for it and to provide circulation. And if you look at the work of Byron Robinson, who wrote the book, The Abdominal and Pelvic Brain, all the way back in 1907, his first edition was 1899. He mapped the whole thing out and showed, which has been re-corroborated by much research, that the organs, the nervous system will not release blood flow to any muscle it shares a neurological or circulatory relationship with at the expense of the health of the organ. So you can see athletes in the gyms doing things like overhead presses and the bar's crooked, or doing a lat pull down and one arm's pulling faster than the other. So for example, if you've got a liver pathology and don't know it, it'll reflexively inhibit all the muscles of the rotator cuff and the right shoulder because it shares a neurological relationship with them. So that person will be pulling down with the bar on the left faster than the right, and the right shoulder is being inhibited because it's being shut off for blood supply because the body won't let the shoulder or the exercise compete with the internal systems because that's a survival mechanism. So in a nutshell, I've just described how the psyche mirrors itself on the body and why the internal health of the body is absolutely more essential to understand than the structural systems, because if you don't understand the internal systems, you never know why you have structural problems short of an acute injury like a fall or a traumatic crash. And if you look at the book, Life is Movement, written by Eugene Sandow, who was for a very long time the strongest man in the world, and the Mr. Olympia trophy is a copy of his body. He wrote in Life is Movement all the way back in 1929, no man can achieve optimal strength until all his organs are healthy. Wow. And we've forgotten all that. We've gotten so caught in the superficial mirror aspects of ourselves and have been so railroaded and trapped by the isolationist anatomical concepts of modern medicine that you now have so-called elite doctors and therapists all over the world that still have no idea how the systems of the body integrate and what the hierarchical order of control is. And so we actually have largely a palliative care system. We don't really have a medical system.